Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi, Scalable Investors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today we're going to be speaking with Chris Larsen, who's the founder and managing partner of Next Level Income, which helps investors become financially independent through education and investment opportunities. Looks like he's involved in a number of things, multifamily, self-storage, oil and gas. So really excited to have him on the show and jump into things. So Chris, what's going on today? How you doing?
Mason, I'm doing great, man. Great to see you here during the holidays.
Likewise. Yeah. Just brushing off my annual goals and trying to get those ready to go for the next year. How about yourself?
I was doing the same thing this morning. Got up bright and early, about 4:30, and got a little quiet time here. And yeah, I'm trying to kind of reflect on the past year, taking a few days off and set up for a really, really great next year, 2022.
Perfect. Yeah. It's nice to have like a week after Christmas to just get things in order, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I think this is a great point. I mean, if you're listening today, like taking that time to reflect, I think not a lot of people spend time and not only kind of plan for the future, but also kind of reflect on the past and, some of the questions that I was going through were, like what, where did you really, feel like you were in tune with, what your mission in life is, and who were you with when you did that? And then kind of thinking about it in a little bit of a different way. And being very intentional kind of going forward. So valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm really big in manifestation, and it's always preached there is like, you have to combine that high intent with the high emotion to get those frequencies going, to align things. It's really interesting. The Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, I just finished reading, The Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. That was really interesting, just scientifically explaining manifestation, like it's a real thing on a quantum level. So
yeah. No, that book is great. And then I'm reading, I think it's, is it Becoming Supernatural? I think that's the one. Becoming Supernatural is the one I'm in now, which talks a lot about meditation. And now, man, I think, you and I are spot on together with that. I'm really big on doing a 3-year vision and picturing, with vivid clarity, what you want in the future. And I think a lot of people, get wrapped up with, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I think it's kind of like when you get in a car and you punch into Google Maps or Waze or Apple, whatever you do, like you put the destination in. And if you put that same destination in every day, you might get a different route a few days out of the week, due to traffic or there's an accident or construction, whatever it might be. But Google doesn't care. It's going to figure it out and tell you the way to go. And I think the universe is the same way. If you know with vivid clarity, like what you want in your future, the universe will help you figure out how to get there, as long as you're committed and you take massive action along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. It's kind of a tangent from a few different questions I want to ask you today, but I really think it's important. So I'm glad that we're jumping into it, and I'm sure that we'll tie it back in later on. But what I like to do with most guests, in case listeners aren't familiar with the background, is just have you go into like what got you into real estate and explaining your journey to what brought you to today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, what we're talking about, I think is as integral to success in real estate or anything else as anything. And I kind of got into visualization back when I was a teenager. I was racing bicycles. So from high school into college, my passion was racing bicycles, and I went to Virginia Tech, and I started racing when I was 14, and I went to school for engineering at Virginia Tech, biomechanical engineering. But all I wanted to do was race my bike and become a professional cyclist. So I go to class, but every other spare minute of my time was spent training, recovering, learning about nutrition, performance, equipment, whatever it might be. That was really where my passion was. And it was there until my best friend and my training partner passed away. He had a massive brain hemorrhage in between my freshman and sophomore year of college. I raced for another year, and I kind of thought like, what am I doing this for? So I came back to school, and after that summer, I was in my junior year of college, and I thought, well, I'm not racing my bike now. I don't want to be an engineer. And I was kind of, like a ship adrift, right? And I was kind of spinning around in the middle of the ocean, like, where do I go next? And cyclists, and if you're listening, or I'm not sure yourself, Mason, but anybody that's ever been part of sports, or reached a fairly high level in sports, unless you're at the top of the top 1% of 1% of even 1%, you're probably not making much money. And that was the case, for me as a cyclist. And I had little kind of like side businesses and stuff like that. I'd learned about investing. I started my Roth IRA when I was in my freshman year of college. I got back to school, and all that time that I had spent racing my bike, I started to learn about stocks and trading. And I was day trading, and I started making pretty good money in the stock market. This was in the late 90s. But it was very volatile. It was very stressful. And I was laying there one night at one morning, really at 3 a.m. Hadn't been able to sleep all night. And I was thinking like, man, what do I want to be doing this in 20 years? This is not a good lifestyle. So I started this just intense education. I read book after book after book, over 250 books in a period of, relatively short period of time. And I learned about all different types of investing. And what I found was what really fit me and my personality was real estate. And I love real estate because you can control the price with which you buy and sell. You can negotiate it. You can have leverage, and you can get started with relatively small amount of money. I bought my first property with less than $3,000 when I was 21 years old, and ended up buying the place next door. I had basically 3 units. I had 2 3-bedroom townhouses, and went from 3 bedrooms to over 3,000 today. So after managing my own portfolio for about 15 years, we got into investing in syndications as limited partners. And over a few years, we transitioned into actually becoming general partners in those deals, bringing in additional investors and going and sourcing our own deals. And that's what we focus on today is mostly commercial properties, income producing properties. But properties that are scalable. And I know you're big on that. And, for somebody that spent 18 years in the medical device industry, myself, 12 of that on call, it was really nice to be able to invest in these properties and get nice income, nice appreciation, but not have to take the phone calls and deal with the headaches that I used to.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I've been reflecting on. I know when I first started in my real estate journey, first it was rent houses, and it was cash flow on about 300 per month for each of the 2 I had purchased off the MLS. So not cash flow on a ton because I didn't even know how to source things off market. And then anyway, I got into the syndication part of things. They're really interested in multifamily and self-storage syndications. And since then I've transitioned into wholesaling to achieve my goal of just generating as much cash as possible, as quickly as possible. But
that strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely got its place, and it's the right thing for me right now. But I really kind of feel like it's obviously a lot more touch points and just constantly just super high volume, just constant marketing versus like syndication. You probably don't have quite as much of that. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? It's a passive income. It's the exact opposite of active income, which is exactly what wholesaling is, right? You say it's accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. And really what I have a small group of coaching clients I work with, and most of them are professionals. So, they have their active day jobs, their W-2 jobs, or their profession or business. And then they have typically an active real estate strategy and then a passive real estate strategy on top of it. So, I mean, if you could generate income, generate capital really is what you're doing, Mason, through those wholesales, and then you funnel that into a really scalable passive strategy. I think that's really the way you really create true wealth, and you build that passive income. And then when you get to the point where you want to slow down, or pull back in one of those areas, or maybe it's not enjoyable, or maybe the market shifts, right? Like my wife and I were building spec houses for a lot of years, and then it didn't make sense. And now I think the market shifted again with the supply and demand curve the way it is, and now it makes sense again. We're starting to build. We're working on another development after about 3 years off. So, but yeah, always with kind of an active strategy and then a passive strategy, and those kind of go up and down depending on the way the market is and where we are in our just in our lives in general.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know you do spec houses as well. Could you discuss that a little bit? Like first, where are you building right now and how many do you usually have at one time that you're
Yeah,
building?
so we live in Asheville, North Carolina, so it's kind of a tertiary market. So if you look at Charlotte is the nearest large market to us. It's about 2 hours away, which is probably I would call it a secondary market. And we have a couple apartments there, a couple multifamily properties that we own there as well. But Asheville is one of these markets that has a really nice quality of life. It has a fairly affordable cost of living. A lot of people would say it's expensive, but if you're moving from the Northeast or you're moving from, like Atlanta or even Raleigh now is expensive. It's quite expensive, compared to some other areas in the country. A lot of people are moving here. They can work from their homes. So again, like I have to go and look this month, but last month we had like record low inventories in this area. So you have people moving here. They want to buy a house, but there's nothing to buy. So yeah, we're working on a small development here. We're actually not building the spec homes. We're doing the development with the land, and we're providing again some more supply for the market here. And it's kind of a fun project. It's a sustainable development that we're working on, and we're preserving a lot of the native trees and fauna that are there. Flora that are there on the property. And it's something that's very meaningful to my wife and I. My wife's the architect on the project, and to be able to provide some options for housing, but also do it in a very environmentally responsible way is something that's it's exciting for me.
Okay, nice. So more of the horizontal development, like installing water lines and sewage and stuff like that.
Exactly, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah, maybe if you need some more lots, I can source some for you because I'm primarily focusing on land right now.
Love it, man. Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk after the show.
All right, perfect. So something that's also related that I noticed on your website is you do this infinite banking using dividend pay and whole life insurance policies, and I'd like to get into that a lot more because I think what you're talking about is like in between each deal, you have this excess cash sitting around and you need to do something with it. So could you talk about that and how you do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is an area I'm super passionate about for a few different reasons. And I actually I haven't told your audience here, if you're listening today and you want a copy of my book, you can go to our website nextlevelincome.com and click on the book link. If you put your address in, and I'll even send you a copy. And in the book, what you'll find is chapter 3. And chapter 3 is titled Your Opportunity Fund. And I actually rewrote the book. I added this chapter here when I went from an ebook to the print edition. Oh geez, I guess it's been almost going on 2 years now since this edition came out, but it's still a very relevant and valid point. So what I call an opportunity fund is on the website, and you termed it in kind of our pre-interview here, Mason, an investment optimizer. And what it is, if you're listening and you're doing deals, I'd say like, what are you doing with your money in between deals? So for most of us, it's sitting in the bank, right? So our money's sitting in the bank. If inflation's running 5 to 15%, like I've talked to people, they say, oh, inflation's 15%. Let's say, the government's saying it's like 5, 6, 7%. Regardless, if it's sitting in the bank and it's not earning much interest, you're losing money in that, right? So that's kind of the one thing you want to think about. Like, can we get our money constantly working? One of the challenges with being in larger syndications, let's say you invest $100,000 and you have, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year coming in from that, goes back in the bank. It sits there, it accumulates till you have maybe another $50,000 to invest in another deal, but it's just sitting there. So how do you overcome what I call that liquidity drag? How do you overcome the cost of taxes, but also the cost of financing in your life? Why pay the bank's interest if you can harness that power yourself, right? Basically become the bank. And this is where the infinite banking concept comes to be. So my father passed away when I was 5. He was 41 years old. He had a couple small life insurance policies. Partly those helped me go to college with very little debt. I was able to come out of college with no debt because of that. So I have a very real instance in my life. My best friend lost his wife. He had or she had insurance that allowed him to quit his job and take care of his daughters. I've seen this a lot in my life, unfortunately, and it's very important to me. So first off, if you have a family, I know you're a new father here, Mason. This is something I think that it's something immediately that you can provide protection for your family, but also a legacy, right? Like, you can provide a legacy for your family. I'll never forget, I sat down with my estate planning attorney about 5 years ago. He looked at our life insurance and said, "Hey, this is your net worth." And I was like, "That's like twice what I thought it was." And he goes, "Well, your life insurance policies." And I was like, you add that in the estate? And it was interesting because, here's somebody that looks at this every day. And he basically said, "Hey, your net worth is your real estate, your stocks, your entire portfolio, your cash, and your insurance." And that's the nice thing with whole life insurance. It's permanent insurance. It's there to provide a legacy for your family. And it increases your net worth of your family. And that's why, very wealthy families have a ton of cash value life insurance or whole life insurance. But the thing that we're talking about is how do you optimize it? How do you maximize it for cash value? And the cool thing is what we do, not only ourselves personally, but also the group that we work with that structures these policies, they structure them to minimize the cost of insurance and maximize the cash value. So what we do is we funnel all of our cash, all of our excess cash into these policies, and then we pull the cash out. And there's kind of some different ways you can do that. You can either take a loan against the policy, or you can set up a line of credit. We actually set up a line of credit, so we don't touch the cash in our policies. And let's just say, for instance, your policies are earning 5% on the cash value. So if you have $100,000 of cash value in your policy, and it goes up by 5% a year because of the dividends in that, it's, I can get into the details of that. But let's say you could borrow that at 3 or 3.5 or 4%, right? If you can borrow at 3% or 3.5%, and you're making 5% or 5.5%, that's a spread of 2%. So you're earning 5%, you're borrowing at 3%, you're earning 2%. That's an arbitrage right there. And then what we do is we reinvest that money into our syndications, and then we take that cash and we flow it all back into those policies. And what happens is you're creating this wheel of wealth where you are putting money through the policies into income producing real estate back in the policies, and the cash value is growing. The value of your real estate is growing. And some people may say, "Yeah, but Chris, now you have a loan, you have a liability." Well, if something ever happened to you, the life insurance companies love to lend money to policyholders because it's insured by the collateral, the policy on that policyholder. So let's say you had $1 million policy and you owed $100,000 that you borrowed to put into syndication. If something happened to you during that time before you paid the loan back, instead of getting $1 million proceeds, you get $900,000 of proceeds for your heirs. But you also have that asset now that you had in terms of that. So I think this solves two problems. One, it solves the problem of what are you doing with your cash in between deals? And also it solves the problem of what do you do after these deals come to fruition? If you need somewhere to put your cash, you can put it in your life insurance policies. It can continue to grow in a tax efficient manner. If you structure them properly, you can even pull that money out tax-free in retirement, almost like a personal pension plan. And this is why so many wealthy families use this strategy, including ourselves.
Okay, nice. Yeah, actually, me and my wife have a policy for each of us. And I think the only thing that kind of gave us a little pause initially is I think the first 3 years, at least the way I structured it, the first 3 years, you can't withdraw 100% of what you put in. You still have that kind of the opportunity cost, which is the cost of the policy. So I don't know.
That's right. And typically, it's not, that's a great point. So again, people are like, "Oh, Chris, there are better investments than life insurance." I would say, well, I would not think of life insurance as an investment, because if you think of life insurance as an investment, then you have to ask my best friend, what was the return on the death of his wife after 3 years? And he'd probably be offended if you asked him that question. It's an instrument, right? So to your point, you pay for the cost of that insurance over typically the first 2, maybe 3 years, like you said. But then you're saying, well, hey, you can't take out 100% of the cash you put in for those first couple of years. But the corollary to that is after a couple of years, and if it's structured properly, it should only be like 24 to 30 months. After that time period, you can take out 100%. So that what you're saying is you've paid for that insurance after a couple of years, and now every dollar you put into that policy, you can take back out dollar for dollar. So if you ask me, if you say, hey, I can set this policy up at age 25 and it's there until I'm 85 or 105, whatever that time period is, and it only took, you had to pay a small amount of money for that for the first 2 years. That actually would be a pretty good investment if you looked at it from that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just looked at it, comparing it to like a 401k. It's kind of like, I saw it as a vesting period. I mean, you can't access your 401k immediately. Actually, it's really in 401k jail, and you still got to pay taxes when you take a distribution on it after 65, right? Or whatever the age is. And
yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, let's do some simple math. So if you're listening, you have a 401k, right? And your tax rates, let's say it's 30%. Okay. So you put $20,000 in your 401k, and you say, well, I don't have to pay tax on that money. Your $20,000 goes in, it grows at 10% a year for 40 years, right? And it comes out, if you're paying 30% when it comes out, you're going to have more money or less money with one of those options. The answer is it's going to be the exact same amount of money. If your tax rate's the same at year zero as it is when you take that money out, and it grows at the same rate, you're going to have the same amount of money. So really, the question you need to ask yourself if you're putting money into a 401k is, do you think you're going to be paying less tax in the future than you are today? And if your answer is yes, you have a strategy that poor people use. So think about that. This is the Dave Ramsey strategy. This is the old way of retiring. You say, hey, I'm going to work, I'm going to make money, and when I retire, I'm going to live on less than what I made. That doesn't sound very appealing to me. If you're listening to Mason's show, you probably want to be wealthy. You want to be financially independent. Your assets are going to keep growing. Do you want your money in 401k jail, or do you want control over your money? That's why we put way more money into our life insurance policies than we do into qualified plans, because we actually have access to it. We have predictability because the insurance company tells us what it's worth, what the guaranteed rates are in the future. Can you go to the government and say, hey, what's my guaranteed tax rate in the future? They'll laugh at you. And if we saw with the recent tax bill or the recent stimulus bill or whatever we want to call it, that was just floated in the House, they wanted to limit the amount of money that you could have in your 401k, and they wanted to penalize you if you had too much. So I think Congress just told you what their plans are for your future. And the future is, we're coming after your qualified plans. And I mean, we can look back over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years and see if my prediction is accurate. But the bottom line is, we need more tax revenue in this country. And there's trillions of dollars tied up in 401ks and other qualified plans. My prediction is they're coming for that money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the bottom line you just hit on, is that someone else is deciding your future and you don't have any optionality. I think the policies provide ultimate optionality. Yeah, exactly. No, thank you. It's crazy. That's the whole reason we're doing real estate investing, so we can have control of our future and the outcome, versus putting it in the stock market, flipping a coin into the wishing well and hoping things work out. So
that's a great, flip that coin. So let's touch on one other thing. So I had one of my friends calls me. He says, hey, Chris, I'm thinking about starting a life insurance policy, but I just saw what Congress is doing. Like, what if they do that to life insurance? Well, here's the thing. The Constitution in this country was founded on property rights and contract law. Okay. Contract law. A life insurance policy is a contract. The government, the IRS, can't change that contract between you and the life insurance company. Okay. They can change future funding limits, and they can do things like they did in the 80s to limit some of the tax advantages. But if they do that, doesn't it make it more valuable today to enter into one of those contracts that will be valid in the future? I think it's really hard to argue against, kind of forming the foundation of your financial platform on something as solid as permanent life insurance. People call it whole life insurance. It's permanent life insurance. If you continue to pay that, it's more permanent than almost any other financial instrument that's out there. And again, it's been around longer than the IRS. It's going to persist. And I think it's a fantastic option for people that invest in real estate, because you can set up that base. You can use that as your own bank for financing for down payments. That's what we used to finance our spec homes for years. And we just put that money back in, and that cash value grew and grew and grew. And now it's there for other investments. It's there to buy cars if we need to. It's there to pay for our kids' college education. It was there when COVID hit, and we withdrew a year's worth of expenses for our family to live on. And it was it felt really good to turn to my wife and say, hey, we might not make any money this year, but we're fine because we have this money in the bank to take care of all the expenses that we have for the family. That felt really good to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you're getting paid to do that. That's what's great. The net interest on it, maybe 1% to 2% still.
Yeah. So just to underscore that. So if I'm earning 5% in my policies and I borrowed that money out at 3%, it didn't cost me anything to take. Let's say I took $100,000 out, and so that's going to cost me $3,000 at 3%, right? But if I earn 5% in the policy, I can pay the $3,000 back. I'm still net positive $2,000, and I got all this peace of mind having that cash sitting there. So again, if you're if you got a family, if you're an investor, certainly take a look. We have tons of resources on the website under the banking link. We have a little webinar on there. We have a white paper on there. If you want specifics on how I personally set up ours, or you want to get in contact with anybody that we work with, you can reach out directly to me as well at chris@nextlevelincome.com. I'm happy to provide you info on that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to put your email in the show notes.
Yeah, please.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I guess the last question on that is, I know that on our policies, at least, there's a maximum we can pay into the policy each year. So say we get huge cash inflow, we're paying down all of the loans that are outstanding. We've also paid that insurance cost. So I guess if we're sitting there all right, well, maybe we just have to start a new policy. Is that something that you do? I need to have a second or a third policy on myself.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, if you're listening, you're like, well, I don't know if I like the sound of this. What are the rules around this? So, first off, my wife and I just started second policies on ourselves. So we started our first policies right before my first son was born, and he'll be 12. So it was 12 years ago that we started those policies, and we just started new policies. So the way it works is you basically have a range. So you have a minimum amount to pay for the policy, and then you have a maximum amount that you can put in to kind of maximize that cash value. And that range, the top of that range is limited by the bottom of the range, or the bottom of the range is limited by the top of the range. So if you're looking at this and you say, hey, I can afford to put in $1,000, your agent or your broker that you work with can structure that policy. Or if you say, well, hey, I want to be able to put in, I'm trying to think, let's say you want to put in $5,000 up to $5,000 a month. Your minimum might be $750 a month, for instance. The cool thing is if you're conscious about it and you set these policies up, after you fund them for a period of time, they're basically self-sustaining. So the policies are earning enough dividends inside the policy to pay the minimum payment. And you really don't have to put any money into them ever again, and you'll maintain your insurance. The nice thing is you always have the option to put in up to that maximum amount that your policy is funded. So this is where it's really important to work with a professional that understands how to structure these policies, because you don't want to go to, we have our most of our insurance through State Farm, and I work for State Farm. So I like State Farm. I think they're a great insurance company. They can't structure these policies. So if you're interested in structuring these policies, you have to work with the professional that really understands it, preferably somebody that is an investor themselves, has a business themselves, because they can understand what you're trying to do and structure it for optimum efficiency and maximum cash value, because that's really the strategy. You're not just going out and buying insurance. You're actually putting a strategy together. So that's a really important point that you just made. You have to make sure you're comfortable with the minimum and the maximum amount so you can work with these policies.
Yeah, exactly. And I assume your policies it might even be the same guy that structured them, but you got the paid up edition rider and all that stuff, right?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So really the way, and again, we can get really into the weeds on this, but I learned a tremendous amount about this. I even got my license in the middle of COVID again, because I was licensed back 20 some years, about 20 years ago when I worked for State Farm. I got my license again. I was like, oh, this is great. I get to learn about all the intricacies here. So it's a base policy, which is like your whole life policy, and then what are called paid up addition riders, and then also sometimes you have term insurance as well. And the reason is you blend these strategies together so that you can maintain compliance with what are called the MEC limits. So what you can do is, if you overfund these policies, you basically put too much money in. The IRS says, wait, we don't want you to basically shelter income, and it becomes what's called a modified endowment contract. So to make sure you're compliant with all those, you have to blend the insurance amounts together to maintain basically a minimum amount of insurance as you maximize that cash value. And that's what an agent that's trained in this area will do, is they'll blend together the different policies so they can, again, minimize the cost of the insurance and maximize the cash value in accordance with what your goals are that you're working with.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one thing to kind of transition away from using it for real estate investing, I know initially, actually, before I learned and set up our policies, I learned about velocity banking and how you could use a credit card to pay down your mortgage in 5 years. And I thought this was really intriguing, but then I learned you could actually do the same thing with this dividend paying whole life insurance policy. But I'm just curious of your opinion, is that still a good use of capital? Because you probably could earn more by putting it in investments. So what do you think about that concept of like paying down your mortgage?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a good question. I'm really, because this gets into a lot of different kind of, philosophical things. So, first off, if you're buying a house for yourself, like, I think it's important to note that's an emotional purchase. It's usually cheaper to rent a house. So if you say, "Hey, I'm going to buy a house for my family," there's emotion, and there's emotional value attached to that, right? So I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm going to buy a house. It's a good investment." Probably not. It might be okay, right? And if you're a real estate investor, you probably know some different strategies. Like Mason, you might be able to go find a house, wholesale a house that you can live in yourself, maybe fix it up and actually create some equity in that. Like, that makes a lot of sense. House hack, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe you have a house like we do, and you have an Airbnb on the first floor. Like, that's actually creating an income stream from your personal residence. Like, you're blending a couple strategies there. Let's say you just buy a house for $500,000. And I was in college, and I co-hosted a radio show. And on one of the shows, what we talked about, it was myself and the financial advisor. We had this debate, which is, do you pay your mortgage off? And I said, no. You want a 30-year mortgage? You don't want to pay your mortgage off. And she said, yes. You want a 15-year mortgage? You want to pay your mortgage off as quickly as possible. Here's my argument against that. I lived through the great financial crisis, 2008. I had lines of credit on my properties. The bank one day just said, "Hey, Chris, you don't have your lines of credit anymore. And by the way, whatever you owe on those lines of credit, it's due. You got to pay it back." Just poof, just like that. So the banks can tell you, how much credit they're going to give you on your house if they want the money back. Like, that's not great, right? Like, if you say, "Hey, I'm going to use my home as my bank," you're taking a risky bet with that. Second, let's say you're very aggressive. You invest the max in your 401k, you're making good money, and you pay off your home as quickly as possible. And then you lose your job. Okay. You lose your job. You can't make your mortgage payment. Now let's say you have a $500,000 house and you have $300,000 of equity or $400,000 of equity. You can't make your mortgage payment. What's the bank going to do? They're going to take your house, right? They're going to sell your house. You're going to sell your $500,000 house for $400,000. They're going to take that $400,000 that you owe. Now, let's say you only owe $50,000. And the bank says, "Well, Chris, we want to take your house back, but you only have $50,000 of equity. And if we had to fire sale your house for $400,000, we're not going to make any money. We don't want that house. So why don't we work out a payment plan to keep you going here?" And that's what happens. That's why people like Donald Trump get to restructure their debt, because if you owe $100,000 to the bank's got you by the you-know-what. If you owe $100 million to the bank, you got the bank by the you-know-what. So, I think what I would rather do is take that, like, let's say your mortgage is $2,000 a month, but you can afford $5,000 a month. Take the $3,000 and put it into a cash value life insurance policy. I would rather have the $500,000 in my life insurance policy and be able to pay my mortgage off and be earning 5% and paying, say, people right now can get, under 3% for a mortgage if they're well qualified, definitely under 4% if you have decent credit, even if it's a pretty high leverage. So again, why not earn 5% on your cash in an instrument like a whole life insurance policy and pay your mortgage off with tax benefits at 3%? And then you can grow that. And then, hey, if you need to, you can take money out and pay your mortgage if something happens, or you can decide to use it for something else. And again, you're actually gonna decrease the risk of a foreclosure by the bank, which is interesting. So there's a lot of different points in there. Again, a house is an emotional purchase. 2, having equity in your house, your equity earns 0, and it makes it more enticing for the bank to take back. And 3, I would rather have access to that cash and in an interest earning environment like a whole life insurance policy where it's providing additional value. For instance, life insurance that can pay my house off and cash that I can use to pay my mortgage if I need to.
Yeah, the concept of the bank being more likely to take it back and create a worse situation for you. I never really thought of that or was aware that. It makes a lot of sense. So,
yeah, again, it's some of these things. It's like, people, we don't think about these things. We don't ask these things. And I picked them up over the years, and it's like, yeah, like that makes it a lot more enticing for a bank to come after that. And the other thing is insurance in most states is creditor protected, and it's protected against certain liabilities. So, you look at, some of these white collar criminals, like I think Ken Lay with Enron was one of the guys that had a bunch of money in life insurance. And there's reasons, right? They kind of hide it away. And I'm not saying, hey, go defraud people and stash your money in life insurance. But again, if you're a real estate investor, you always want to minimize your risk and your liability with respect to what people can access.
Yeah, that's one of the most beautiful things about life insurance policies is that money is outside of your estate. And it's like, it's like me buying a cup of coffee. Like you can't attack the cup of coffee. I just pay Starbucks for it. You go after Starbucks,
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
And it's why it's also able to bypass all of the probate issues and all that stuff at the time of death. So
exactly. Yeah. It really, I think, again, like if, when I talk to investors a lot of times and we kind of talk about, their general financial picture, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not here to give people, specific financial advice, but, when it comes to what we do, I said, hey, like the first thing we did was we structured these policies for ourselves before we went and invested in syndications. We kind of built that financial foundation, right? And then we started putting our investments on top of that foundation. But if you have, a good cash value life insurance in place, you know what it's going to be worth in the future. You know what the income's going to be at age, say 65. Your family's protected along the way. Then you start building on top of that. I think that's a really nice way to structure your finances. And that's what we've done.
Yeah, definitely. What was attractive to me is like, if I just continue putting it in, it's like a savings account that's paying maximum interest. And then if I want to stop paying like, at the age of a typical retirement age, it still pays to that like $100,000 salary that the portrayed holy grail of 401ks should do. So, but it's contractually guaranteed. It's going to, they have to do it. It's in the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's very powerful.
Yeah. Okay. Changing gears a little bit because I didn't expect to speak so much about it, but yeah, it's great.
It is. It's so, and again, it's so powerful. Like I said, I'm passionate about it. And if we never talk about real estate, we just talk about that. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Oh yeah, I think so. And for anyone that's like new to my podcast, you could learn more about it. I spoke with Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, I think his firm name. In a prior episode, I also spoke with another guy who's a multifamily investor who also uses infinite banking in these policies. So good stuff. Yeah, there's other resources there. But I also noticed on your website, you don't have just multifamily, but you'll do like oil and gas deals and some commercial office buildings. Could you go into like oil and gas? Like, since I'm in Texas, I should know a little bit about this, right?
Yeah.
How's it work?
So I mean, look, we are right now, I think we're burning more coal than we ever have in this country. And I've had solar panels, I've had a Prius, we have a plug-in hybrid. I mentioned, we're building a sustainable development. I care deeply about the environment. I care deeply about having areas for my children to enjoy. But the bottom line is we need energy in this country. And the government subsidizes, they subsidize for lack of a better term, but they incentivize oil and gas energy exploration, and including solar power, including all these things. So, again, what I structured Next Level Income for is it's an education site. I like to put information up there and outline the reasons why we do things. Like we just had a great conversation about cash value life insurance. We also had about a year ago Thomas Powell on, and he talked about what his company does with oil and gas as well. And some of the things, if you're a high income W-2 earner, one of the things I like is that you can invest, say, $100,000 in an oil and gas investment and deduct a very high percentage, sometimes 80 to close to 100% of that investment. So let's say you're earning 15% in oil and gas investment, 15% in a multifamily investment. If you can deduct 100% from your W-2 income for that oil and gas investment, you're effectively getting a higher rate of return, which is really nice. So I think first off, we need energy in this country. Democratic administrations have typically been good. And when I say good, I mean energy prices go up. That means, because they're kind of anti energy in a lot of ways, anti petro energy in a lot of ways, which means, supply goes down, demand stays the same or goes higher, prices go up, right? It's just how the world works. So prices have gone up. So if people were investing in oil and gas over the past couple of years, they're doing pretty well right now as prices rise. So you have that structure here until we were able to produce 100% renewables, and you get those tax benefits as well. So I think I personally I like investing in oil and gas opportunities that are kind of like a value add multifamily play. So you go in and you invest in say an oil well or a series of oil wells that are already producing, and maybe you implement some technology that allows improvement of operations. So you're pumping more oil, or you drive the price down, and that's kind of like a value add strategy. And then you can sell those oil wells after, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years for an increase in your investment. So it's very similar to the same strategy we use in multifamily. And the group I personally invested with, they were real estate guys and real estate people, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense to me. So I like to think in terms of that. And it's the same way with life insurance. It's like, if you think about life insurance in terms of real estate, you buy a whole life insurance policy, you build equity in that policy, even though your payment stays the same, just like buying a piece of real estate. So I guess that's the way my brain works. I like to do things the same way in insurance and real estate, as well as oil and gas.
Okay. So, are you ever the sponsor in these deals, or are you mainly like bringing investors to it? And someone else is the sponsor and operator of it?
Yeah, so I do not sponsor oil and gas deals. So I've put information out there. I've shared information on different investments and different groups that I've worked with in the past. So again, if you're interested in learning more about that, send me an email. I'm happy to connect you with the group I've worked with in the past for that. But that's more of a value add for investors that I've worked with. Whereas on the commercial real estate side, I am a GP on those deals.
Okay. But in oil and gas, you still have like depreciation from the equipment on land. You can still use the shield income, but W-2 income, which is amazing.
Exactly. So that's a big difference that I think, investors don't, maybe they don't realize that. So if you're listening and you have high W-2 income and you're looking for opportunities, this is something you can incorporate into your tax planning strategies, going forward.
Okay. What do the returns look like on a typical oil and gas deal that you've invested in?
I think it's always typically safe to say it depends on the deal. So I've invested in some really well performing deals out there with oil and gas. So it's hard for me to kind of throw that out there with respect to returns. But again, if you're interested in learning about it, I'm happy to put you in touch with a couple of different individuals, and they can help kind of walk through what those returns might look like.
Okay. So how about commercial office deals? Because I don't really hear a lot of people talking about those. And Are you a sponsor on these types of deals?
I have been, yes. So so commercial office, I mean, I think, we're coming out of COVID, right? So I think it's important to kind of look at this. We've been coming out of COVID, and I always like to think about, all right, are we overcorrecting in an area? And, I believe offices are here to stay. do we have higher amounts of remote work? Yes. But is this a time where you can buy deeply discounted deals? So we bought properties at like 25 cents on the dollar in terms of cost to rebuild. We bought it like 50, 60 cents on the dollar in terms of, buying from groups. So we've looked for deals that have deep discounts and, low break even costs. So, if you can enter an office building, so let's say it costs $400 a square foot to build a property, and you can buy that same property today for $100 a square foot. So you can't rebuild it for the cost you're paying for it, right? So, whether you're using it for office or multifamily or a hotel, I mean, whatever it might be, I think if you can get these deep discounts on these properties, like for instance, like student housing, right? So colleges are out. I have a friend of mine. He's a sponsor as well. They went out and they started buying up student housing, and it's performing really well this year. Students have gone back to college. I mean, are colleges going away? I don't think so. I think that there's still going to be students to rent. So if you can get some really good discounts where people are running scared, same thing I'd say with senior housing. I think right now is a great time to start looking at senior housing. Demand's going to be skyrocketing over the next decade, and people are freaking out because COVID decimated a lot of these assisted living and senior housing facilities. So, whenever the economy, what does Warren Buffett say when there's blood in the streets, it's time to buy. Like this is, when things look really bad and when people are like writing off offices, I said, hey, this is a time we should start looking at some of these opportunities. And, again, be conscious, make sure that you're buying it at discounts, make sure you have low loan to value, and make sure you have low break even occupancy and they're cash flow positive. And if you can check all the boxes on that, again, whether you're using it for office in the future or converting it to something else, there's value to be had in properties like that.
Okay. Are there certain markets for the office buildings you're looking at?
Yeah. So, again, I think this is, if you look at the lifeblood of real estate, right? Commercial real estate in general, you want population growth and you want job growth. So whether you're talking about multifamily real estate or you're talking about commercial office space, you want to be in markets that have solid population growth. And these would be markets like Texas, which I know you're a fan of, Dallas, Houston, Austin, Florida, like Orlando, Tampa. Miami's a big one as well. We bought a property in Jacksonville last year. So you have all these companies that are moving out of the Northeast. You have all these people that are moving out of the Northeast, California, moving to Florida. These are great markets. The Carolinas are also terrific markets. But I think also for office, you have to also look at places like the Midwest, like Ohio, Kansas City. You have these markets that, businesses are relocating to because the cost of doing business is lower, and they can move their offices wherever they want. So those are other markets that I think can be really appealing. Kind of these suburban Midwest areas are really good. So,
okay, yeah, that's interesting. It does definitely seem like they are maybe a little bit outside the limelight. Like Texas and Florida are obviously really big, being pushed everywhere, but there's other ones, Ohio and stuff. So I think we're mainly wrapping up here. Just in terms of like your multifamily deals, are those typical like value add deals, or what do those look like?
Yeah. So when we started syndicating deals, Mason, this was over 5 years ago. We started looking at deals in late 2015, closing our first deal in 2016. We were buying 70s and 80s built, pretty deep value add deals. So we were investing say $10,000 a door in properties we were paying $75,000-$100,000 a door for. So totally redoing the floors, the cabinets, the fixtures, like toilets and all this stuff, right? So putting a lot of money in there. We have moved up the food chain in terms of the quality of these properties. So we've started buying properties that are built in the last, say, 20 years. Some of our recent properties have been built in the last 2 years. And people would say, how do you add value to a property that was built in the last year or two? And the answer is you need to look for what the residents of that property desire. So if you've built the property a couple of years ago, we may come in and we may become the internet service provider. We may add private yards. We may add technology packages. All these things. You can have package rooms and all these little amenities and features that residents like and expect. And if you're buying a property at a 4 or a 5 cap, so you're talking about every dollar of revenue is increasing the value of that property $20 to $25. Let's say you just add $100 on average per door in that property because you have a technology package, you add the internet, you have some other, small amenities that you're able to add in there, across 200 doors, the amount of value you add is millions and millions of dollars to the value of that property with relatively small cost in terms of what it takes to create that value. So again, our strategy is still a value add strategy at its core, but obviously it differs when you're dealing with, say, a 2020 built property versus a 1970s built property, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know you have a hard stop coming up, so I really appreciate your time and all this. You did mention your email in terms of if people want to get in contact with you. Is there anything else though you want to mention? Places people should go?
Yeah. Well, first off, Mason, thank you, man. You provide so much value to your audience. I love what you're doing. And it's been a great conversation here, talking about some areas that, maybe I wasn't thinking about getting into, but I think are super important. If you want to learn more about what we do at Next Level Income, check us out, nextlevelincome.com. As I mentioned, you get a free copy of our book. Just click on the book link. You can also get that webinar, that white paper at the banking link. If you want to learn more about anything we talked about, feel free to reach out to me at chris@nextlevelincome.com.
All right. Perfect. Thanks a lot. I'll have it all in the show notes. And thanks again for your time.
Mason, it's been a blast, man. Look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise. All right. That's another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to leave a review and subscribe on whatever channel you're using to listen or watch these episodes. And also be sure to go to scalablerealestateinvesting.com, scroll to the bottom and fill out the form to sign up for our email. And you could also reach me directly at mason@scalablerealestateinvesting.com. That's MASON @scalablerealestateinvesting.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me to either partner on deals or even be considered to do your own episode on this podcast. Thanks again and have a great day.